We are about to dive into a really beautiful conversation with Lauren Smallcombe. Now, you might recognize that name from a very popular episode of ours on the Relationship Rehab podcast, where her and her husband came on to talk about ADHD, neurodivergent relationships. And if that's something you're interested in and you haven't heard it yet, I will put the link in the show notes. But this time, Lauren has come back onto the podcast to talk about her new memoir called The Golden Child. And it talks about her journey as she grew up in a dysfunctional family dynamic that placed this role of golden child on her. And she talks about how her journey unfolded when she came into her 30s and started to question everything, her religious beliefs, her family systems, and how she was then demoted from being a golden child to being a scapegoat. It is a very vulnerable conversation. And if you are someone that has been ostracized or estranged from their family, or you're thinking about making moves towards that, and that is a really scary thing to do, Lauren gives us insight on her own journey and how she was able to come out the other end, giving us all that hope and vision that it is possible, and how you can start to make those first steps towards setting boundaries with your family, dealing with that parental rejection when you have parents that don't accept you for who you truly are, that put conditions on you for their love. We talk about all of that and more in this episode, so I am more than excited to share this episode with you. Let's dive in with Lauren Smallcombe. Hello, loves. Welcome back to the Relationship Rehab. And today I am so excited to welcome Lauren Smallcombe back onto the podcast. She was here last year with her husband, Luke, talking all the things about ADHD and attachment trauma. But today she is back just by herself. And we're going to talk through a very prominent and essential book, I believe, for us all to be reading if we do relate to this, and that is The Golden Child. This is her debut book, all about her journey, and I'm going to let her tell you a little bit about her journey. But first of all, Lauren, welcome back, and thank you so much for being here again.
Thank you so much, Sammy. I love chatting with you, and I know this conversation will be held and navigated really beautifully by you, like your conversations always are. So just thank you.
Of course, I'm so excited. Let's just get to it, Lauren, because I cannot wait. So, the title of the book is called The Golden Child, and I'm all for archetypes here in the Relationship Rehab, and this is an archetype that I'm yet to come across. So I would love to hear from you what the Golden Child actually means. But first I want to read what you've put in the beginning of your book, and that is: the Golden Child is fundamentally an extension of the parent, hence he or she is the embodiment of perfection. The good child, the special child, who is a projection of all the impeccable characteristics of the parent, and hence should strive regularly to facilitate those qualities of a virtuous person. Whoo! There is so much in there. But I want to hear it from you. How does that weave into your journey?
Yeah, it has become a very meaningful archetype for me in understanding my story, my present, how I got to my present day life, and the journey of being a child in a family system that wasn't solid and healthy necessarily. And in these systems, it's very common for there to be roles assigned, not verbally necessarily or even consciously, but children take on, as do partners, different roles in dysfunctional or narcissistic family systems. And golden child is a very common one because when you're very young, you develop this thing called whole object relations, where you're able to differentiate that we all hold good and bad. We all hold black and white, meaning like dark and light, right? And so when we don't go on to develop this ability to hold the nuance of that, this is where personality disorders, narcissistic tendencies come in, because you very easily categorize yourself and others in this very black and white binary way. And so you see yourself as good, you have to see yourself as good. And then anyone else who is doing good for you, you see them as good as well. And anyone else who crosses you, you see as bad. And so it sounds very young and juvenile way of thinking, and it is. It is how it begins. But we develop beyond that in a healthy family system to be able to hold that every single person has good and has bad. In a narcissistic or a dysfunctional family system, unfortunately, there needs to be these strong archetypes of good and bad to kind of make the family system stable. It sounds counterintuitive, but if you have a child that you can kind of project all the good that you are or that you think you should be onto this child, and then you have another child, typically we call the scapegoat or the black sheep, and this is where you project all the negative qualities that you have and don't want onto that child. And how that happens is kind of mysterious, but my understanding is it's this unique blend of the temperament the child comes out with, at birth, the birth order, the different characteristics if the child even looks more like a certain parent or acts more like a certain parent. It's kind of all of these unspoken things that are noticed about the child to whereas they might step into one of these different roles of scapegoat or golden child. And systems never just have one. They always have to have both. That polarization always has to be there. There always has to be someone we can blame for the problems in the family. And there always has to be someone we can point out as our trophy of like, look at we're a good, solid family. Look at what this child does. This child is truly representative of us. Whereas the scapegoat child, they're the part of us that is exiled, that no one wants to claim or name.
I think that's a really great explanation, Lauren, of the duality of the golden child is the prized child, the perfect child, the one that's put on a pedestal by their parents, and then the scapegoat, the black sheep of the family. They're outcast and they are the nuisance, and they bring shame to the
Yeah.
family just by being who they are. And I know that you talked in your book that you went from being the golden child to being the scapegoat. Can you talk us a little bit about your personal path of how you recognized that you were actually being the golden child? What did that look like for you? And then your downfall, let's say,
Yeah.
into the scapegoat role.
Yeah. So, just like so many of our paths of evolution, I didn't know those terms while I was in golden child role. So, I always was the golden child, and yet I never had language for the position that I had been put in. Around 30 years old, I began questioning tenets of my family system and tenets of our religious political beliefs. And when I started questioning those, I was very quickly silenced. Like this was a quick alarm system went off in the system, and it was like, nope, 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 this is not allowed. And up until that point, the things that I had kind of explored and questioned or kind of pioneered were still within the realm of acceptable um, behavior. So there's a quote at the beginning of my book that says, "Those who do not move do not notice their chains." And that quote, when I found that 3 or 4 years ago, it was so incredibly powerful for me because I didn't know I had chains on. And this is something that's hard for people to understand who weren't in a golden child role is like, how did you not recognize that you were just appeasing your family system constantly? And the answer is baffling, but it's true. Like I went as long as my chain went and I never went farther. So I never felt the pull of my restriction, the pull of not being allowed to walk outside of that cage. And so as around 2015, there were Black Lives Matter movements happening in America at the time. Donald Trump had been elected as the candidate to become the president, and I was just very, very confused. I had been a devout evangelical Christian up until this point, and all the people in my world in America were not questioning what was happening. And I was just very, very confused. I had been brought up on kind of two things: Christian nationalism, but also the good parts of the faith, of the fruits of the Spirit, and putting other people first, and the Beatitudes, and these beautiful qualities of Jesus. And I was like, how? How is this embodying that? So the questions that I had were not being answered. So I decided, in my golden child veneer, but wild at heart, part of me, to find the answers on my own and to go out kind of beyond that pasture that I was allowed to be in, and to find a deeper, truer story that I could align with, because that was no longer it.
That must have been so brave because,
So
like you
scary.
said, so scary, so brave. Because, like you said, you're chained, you're in a cage. And it makes total sense when we bring attachment trauma into play here of you will do whatever it takes as a child to sustain the connection, the attachment that you have with your primary caregiver, with your parents. So if appeasing and pleasing and proving and being a certain way is what is going to protect the attachment, then that's what you will do. That will become your survival mechanism. And that's what we see in our traits then in our adult relationships. But what I'm hearing from you, Lauren, is you started to question everything: religion, politics, the way that your family was set up in terms of dynamics and roles. And then you started to explore by yourself. How old were you at that point? And what did that look like to then break free of those chains and start to explore what was true and authentic for you?
Yeah, right. I was 30. And it was actually right before we moved to Thailand, which is really interesting because we were moving to Thailand to do missions work. We were at like the pinnacle of what our version of faith said you have to do to be golden. But actually leaving America and getting a bigger perspective, living among internationals and getting to understand and appreciate Thai culture and all of these things augmented our growth, because we just saw the world as so much bigger than that version that we were kind of spoon fed. But yeah, I was 30, and I look back on that time and it was very, very messy. Like, I wish I had it in a nice little bow. Maybe that's why I wrote a book, because I was like, I need to put this somewhere and tie a bow around it because it was such a train wreck while it was happening. But we were very insulated in our community. We didn't know many people who thought outside of conservative evangelicalism in America. So we we felt like a pariah. Like we were made an outcast, like pretty quickly, in the sense that those conversations people were not interested in having. So we started finding people that were having them and started listening into stories that we otherwise would have not given much credence to. So I just started reading a ton and listening to podcasts and trying to understand, parts of history that I missed, that the narratives I were given were glossed over. And I felt alive for the first time in so many ways, because I was just voraciously consuming these different narratives, and I was so hungry, and I was ready for it. I really don't think prior to this point in my journey I would have been ready. I know I wouldn't have been, because I already at this point had adopted one child who was Black, and my husband's white, so my two biological children are white. And then we adopted this baby who was Black, and we didn't read. This is all in my book, and it's like such a shame, but it's the truth and it needs to be shared. We didn't read the transracial adoption information that the agency gave us, because we were bought into this lie, the colorblind ideology that you just need love and you don't need to understand culture and you don't need to understand people's identity. So we were not ready, and we were in a multicultural church, and we had this Black child, and we still were very much not safe in that realm of our own education and our own evolution. So I was very eager to understand and to grow as a person and not be so scared of questioning. Like I was told by my parents, this is not what we question, this is not how we believe. And it's interesting because as the golden child, I did have a sense of self, whereas a lot of scapegoats, they don't develop a robust sense of self. And that's tragic because it helps immensely in a million ways to have a solid sense of self. Mine was a bit off because it was built on, oh, you're all good, which wasn't true. But I did have confidence. I had the belief in my ability to affect change. Like I had these things that I was given from the attachment. And so when I was told like, oh no, you can't believe that way or you can't be curious, I didn't listen, which wasn't very golden of me. But in one sense, it kind of was because I was taught that I mattered and I had value and I could take up space. But the caveat, the fine print that I never read, that I didn't know, was not that kind of space. Only the space we let you take up. And that's what I found out at 30 when everything started to unravel was, oh shoot, this had terms and conditions the whole time. This was completely conditional, dependent upon my blind compliance, which at that point I physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually could not offer anymore. Like once my eyes were open, I could not give that anymore. I had to seek authenticity.
I'm with you on everything that you're saying. And I'm sure a lot of us are relating right now to this idea of conditional love. Like you have to be a certain way, believe certain things, do certain things, say things a certain way in order to be accepted and loved by us. And when you start to step out of that line, that's a big
Yes.
no-no. And you have to either come back in and we'll just pretend that never happened, or you're on your own.
Yeah.
And it sounded like you were dipping your toes into another pond and you just went with it. I feel like a lot of us listening can relate to it in some shape or form, but maybe there's a lot of us that are still in that box because it's a very real fear, right? The fear of abandonment and rejection, especially from your own family. To be on the other side of that just seems too scary. Like that just is something that we do not want to rock the boat in. And we then do fall back into these roles of pleasing and golden child and just nodding along to whatever they want and living lives that feel very empty, that feel very inauthentic. So, with you being on the other side, I wonder what was that pushing point? Like, what was the motivation for you to be like, you know what? Life on the other side, living my truth, living life authentically is better than being inside the box, even though I get to sustain these attachments with the family. I know that you mentioned the move to Thailand was a massive eye opener, but was there anything else that really supported you or pushed you in that direction?
Oh man. I want to have this like amazingly true answer that I just chose it because I was so brave. And it's not entirely true because honestly, the unraveling is something that happened to me versus me choosing it. So I'm not saying that choices weren't involved that caused the unraveling of the status quo and everything I knew as it was, but it was like the relationships deteriorated so profoundly. It was like my questions just ate me alive. I couldn't rest. I couldn't hide them away. So, in that way, it was a choice, right? But it almost feels like it was just what happened. And then when you open Pandora's box, it was like all of those things had to be seen for what they were. And they could not tolerate that version of me. So I was either going to change back, like you said, or they were going to find a way to tolerate that new evolved version of me. And since I couldn't change back and they couldn't accept me, it just happened to dissolve. It wasn't so much a choice of like one day getting up and saying, do I choose to go no contact with my family or not? It just truly broke down irreparably, irreconcilably so.
So you're in a position now where you're in no contact with your family and estranged from them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And how does that feel for you?
Mm, yeah. Thank you for asking that. It is something that the vast majority of adult children would never in a million years choose. Like you said, and your attachment background, and you teach, like our attachment relationships are central to who we are. And they form us, but then they continue to form us. It's where we fit and where we belong in the world helps us make sense of our story and who we are and how we orient ourselves in the world. And so becoming disconnected, exiled, ostracized, estranged, there's lots of different words for it, is incredibly unnatural. It just feels so cheap to say that it's really painful. So I'm trying to look for a better word because painful doesn't encompass how difficult it is. And I think that's because it's not meant to happen. We're supposed to have our people. We're supposed to be known. And yes, our friends are make so much meaning in our lives, but we're supposed to have those people from beginning to end as well. And so estrangement becomes this like daily complex grief. It's not a once and done thing, which it's a complex relational agreement. One of the researchers, I think her name's Kylie, she calls it a complex relational agreement. And it's like you're constantly trying to navigate this alive thing, even though there's no contact. Those relationships, those people are still there. And all those memories and traditions and holidays and significance is all still there, but you have to orient yourself to it in a different way. And I think that's what's really challenging for adults who find themselves in the position that they don't want to be in. And yet, what are their other options?
Yeah. And that must be a very difficult place to be in where you feel like you don't have any other options. Because we do hear all the time, family is everything, blood
Right.
is thicker than water, and all these different quotes, and family comes first. And it's almost like we have to overextend ourselves, break our own boundaries, sacrifice a little bit more than we would for other people for our family. I'm sure a
Mhm.
lot of us see this in our own dynamics that we do take up these different roles and we do take maybe a little bit more crap from our family than we would from our friends.
Mhm.
So and like you said, it's not natural. It's incredibly complex to make that decision. It's not an easy decision to go no contact with your family. And I'm sure there's a daily grief, like you said, that comes up that needs to be processed. Do you feel like that is still impacting you in a big way and with your own family now, with your children, with your husband? I would love to know how you're doing now in this present moment with your own family, with your own children.
Yeah. So I'm 5 years out of estrangement with my family. I became estranged with both parents and my sister and brother at the same time, which often happens if you start listening to stories because the family system is so closed and is so rigid that if you question the head of it, the mom and dad or one or the other, um, everyone kind of follows suit and shuts you off as well. And in that, a lot of the dynamics of really rigid family systems can mirror like mini cults. And that might sound like strong language, but they've compared the two. And there's a lot of similarity, a lot of crossover. And that's because they're built on similar tenets that the leaders have the ultimate wisdom, have the ultimate authority, that questions and curiosity and differentiation from said group is sin or is bad. Things like that that build these systems are similar. And so, just like people having to leave a cult, you can't reform the cult right? No one would be like, go back and reform the cult. You have to help those people. They're your people. It's like, no, you have to get out so that you can save yourself and get healthy. And that's how a lot of us feel when we have to leave these dysfunctional family systems is if I want to save myself and my future family, I I don't have a choice. And so I'm seeing this play out really profoundly with my children. I think it happened in like the nick of time where I woke up, like you said, it was in many areas, but I woke up to these dynamics and started to unravel them so that I could look at them, kind of like a ball of yarn. It was all tangled, and I had to start unraveling it so I could look at it and see it and understand it, see where it came from, and then see which parts were good and which parts were dangerous and unsafe and unsupportive for my family moving forward. And I started to do all that before my kids were like teenagers, and now they're teens. And I am seeing so significantly if I was still appeasing that dysfunctional family system, I could not be doing what I'm doing now with these three little humans who are wrestling through autonomy and individuation and their beliefs and their choices and their identity and their hopes and dreams, all of these things that are very to rigid family systems if it's not exactly what, the parents want it to look like. And of course, that's going to be because humans are so uniquely themselves. Even if we're from the exact same blood, we're going to end up looking very different. And that diversity is beautiful. That's something that actually makes families healthy, is when there are those polarizations, but in a healthy way, not in a golden child scapegoat way. In more of a, oh, this one's the super extroverted, rebellious one, and this one's the, more quiet book nerd, and this one, like all of that diversity creates healthier, more robust systems, just like diversity in nature actually makes systems healthier. It does in people too. So I'm seeing now that if I hadn't been doing all of that deconstruction in my mind of all of that, I really couldn't offer my kids what I'm able to offer them now. And honestly, that helps me come to terms with what has happened. And it helps me realize we are doing important generational work for the future and it's worth it. And if I can take the blame and be the sacrifice so that we can redirect the trajectory of where the family line was going, like I will do that. And I'm so thankful to have a super supportive husband and friends because that makes me like really resourced. And I understand that a lot of people don't have that level of resourcing to put up with such incredible, the pain of being exiled and the pain of being that cycle breaker. I was able to do that and I don't regret it literally ever. I don't exaggerate. I have sorrow and heartbreak over it every day. But regret, I have zero regret because I see the fruit of like me becoming my authentic self and being free. Like for the first time in my life, I'm free. I'm not an image, I'm not a projection of someone else's vision for me. I'm just me and I get to figure out who that is and I can take as long as I want to do that. And I love that. And I have people who want me to be fully me in my life. There's nothing more exhilarating. And then to see how it's impacting my kids is just like, oh, this is what loving my kids well looks like, and it's worth it. But I would say that counting the cost is really important. And having a good system in place, a good structure of support and resourcing is really, really important before you make big decisions when it comes to these relationships where you're not free in, whether it's a partner, whether it's family, whether it's work. Like, not, I didn't know how painful and the fallout. I didn't know what immense grief on a daily basis for years would look like. Thankfully, because I didn't really have a choice of it happening, I was thankful to find my resources and my support along the way. And for me, that was things like being in nature, moving my body. I got into the gym after years of chronic illness. That was another part of my being the golden child, is I was very chronically ill, and that was super connected to the suppression of my true self and my voice. But as was beginning healthier and healing, I was able to get in the gym, build muscles, and actually feel strong for the first time in a really long time. Reading has been a huge thing. Reading feminist literature, reading trauma healing literature, listening to music and exploring basically the arts, which I never would have said art was important for me before, but the different ways that art can help us heal has been huge. My animals, they've been a huge part of my healing. Finding safety and finding who I really am, being able to pursue my authentic self and embrace her and love her and support her has been so helpful. So I just encourage folks that having to make those big boundary decisions is real because the fallout could be significant. So prepare for that, kind of assume the worst, that that might happen, that people won't change, and that you'll need to create distance so that you aren't destroyed by it. Like some people are just destroyed, like addiction, suicidality, severe mental health issues, because that's how much we're supposed to have our people and be in safe, supportive relationships with them.
Yeah, it goes against the biological need and urge to sustain the
Yeah,
attachment to our parents and our caregivers. And we see this in nature as well, how the young, regardless of age, can deteriorate if they are separated from parents and caregivers and not given that sense of safety. And I want to thank you for giving some suggestions and some insight into what supported you to be able to break free, to be able to go no contact and start to explore for yourself. And what I'm noticing, it all comes down to safety. Being able to provide this sense of safety for yourself, support system is massive, and be able to reclaim that sense of self. Because when we think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right, safety is number one. So being able to get that solid so you can the
that's
move up
right.
the ladder. And then comes, when we feel safe, that's when we can explore our authenticity and our
Mhm.
autonomy and be able to feel that sense of freedom that you talk about so beautifully. And I'm
Mhm.
sure that that is such a incredible feeling after so many years of being the golden child, of now having this taste of freedom to start to make your own decisions and start to find out who you are outside of those conditions that you spoke about, and breaking free of that generational trauma that you mentioned and being able to give your children that platform to explore their identity, to explore what feels authentic for them. And when we think about healthy attachment, it comes down to that, like being able to nurture a sense of authenticity and autonomy in our children so they can thrive as healthy individuals in society. Which brings me to a very curious question, Lauren, is why do you think these rigid family systems are in place? If we're talking that this is super healthy, this diversity in family dynamics, like us, we go off and we travel and we want to explore the world, and then we have another child who wants to stay home, and if that's healthy to have all these different beliefs and opinions and values, then why do you think that we are seeing, especially in America, correct me if I'm wrong, we're having these very rigid family systems of having to follow a certain religion, certain political ideas, and follow certain behaviors?
Yes, America's a mess in so many ways, but yeah, they're kind of like a macrocosm of a family system. They're kind of a larger picture of what happens in on these individual family system levels, of rigidity, of polarization, of fear and hatred. I don't know. the answer to your question. And I ask this question so much. So I love that we're just talking about it because it's kind of goes into the philosophical, sociological, also psychology, which is more obvious. But I want to understand why. And I think what helps me hold my parents earlier on in my healing, I really wanted to split. I don't know if you ever heard Esther Perel's term, split the ambivalence. And it's like when you can pick one side or the other, like I love them or I hate them. I didn't want to feel such conflicting feelings towards them. I wanted to just like hate them and move on or love them and go back. And yet, my specific story, and so many of our stories, don't have that split line that we can so easily follow. And so I am learning to hold like multiple realities to be true at once. And I believe that my parents loved me, and somewhere deep down beneath all of their defensive posturing and protection now, they still do somewhere. And also, they are so unable to embrace nuance. They cannot. I genuinely believe that without some real significant intentional inner work of some variety, they are not able to hold me as beloved and different from them. They can only hold me in the image that they had me, and any other image of me that they don't know how to love and to move forward. So how is this happening so frequently, so often? You know, one of the editors I was working with, she was really helping me craft the story. She said it was like clay, working with to write my book. She was like, we have all this clay and we have to like form the story from the clay and find the right pieces and mold it and shape it like, 100 times over on the pottery wheel. And she said, essentially what you're asking that we don't actually get to know the answer to is, how did this happen? How could this happen? That they're not addicts, they don't have significant mental health. Like, how could parents in that state reject their once beloved child? It is counter everything we know. And that's what I went on to the journey of trying to understand. But ultimately, I don't think there's a way to understand it. And I hate that answer.
But it's an honest one
It's honest. Yeah.
because maybe there is more than one answer to this question. And I'm pretty sure that it all comes down to fear. Fear of
Mm.
what others are going to think and say, fear of
Yeah.
what that looks like to have a child that is different from us. And it's a very important point that we just emphasize that sometimes it's not about you personally, because I know a lot of listeners probably thinking it's because of me, it's because I'm a bad person, it's because I did something wrong, when really we're talking about something much deeper than that. We're
Much
talking about
better.
layers of generational trauma, layers of fear, and societal conditioning, political conditioning, religious conditioning.
Yes, 1,000%. This like very complex, layered beast that form these really conflicting or conflict laden inflammatory situations within families. And I think it's just really important for people to understand that this happens. This is an anomaly in the sense that, like, it's not natural, but it's not rare. And parents are always supposed to love their children. Yes, that's what we're told in stories and in movies and all the things, but it doesn't always play out in real life because of all those things that you just mentioned, because of the fear, how strong it is, all the conditioning, all of the other like political, religious, and cultural paradigms that people shape their worldview with are so freaking strong. They are, oh my gosh, they hold so much power and so much weight, and sometimes even more than the power and weight of love for your child. And that is hard to imagine and very, very true.
it's a hard pill to swallow, isn't it?
It's
When
such a hard
you don't
pill.
want it to be like that. You want it to be different. When you're seeing all your friends and people around you have such loving families who love and accept you unconditionally, it can be such a hard place to be, to then get to that point where you have to accept that this is your story, that this is what is happening to you, for you. It can be very
That's
hard pill to swallow, right?
Yep, exactly. And I love that you brought up that the scapegoat, a lot of people really feel like, is it me? And I know that you have listeners right now who it's so much easier because this is such a perplexing question and so mind bending. It's easier to just say, well, it's me. I'm literally the problem. I'm not worthy of love. I'm not worthy of care. I'm not worthy of them growing and learning how to respect and honor me and my boundaries. I'm just not good enough for that. And I want to say, as one golden child to others, probably scapegoats if you're saying that, um, because that's actually not something that I really struggle with. That's one of the benefits of being a golden child. I genuinely know my worth, and I probably knew it too much, which is why some golden children can turn narcissistic. I kind of went the empath side and became the helper healer of that path. But, anyways, the scapegoat child is going to develop that belief in their badness. And there's so many estranged or low contact adults right now that genuinely believe, maybe they don't think it cognitively, but they feel the sense of them being the reason, and if only they were different their parent would change. And I just want to tell you, bullshit. They wouldn't. They would not, because it's all about the role you're in. It's not about you. It was never about you. It was always about how they had to make sense of you in the world. And they couldn't handle your free spiritedness and your willingness to tell the truth and your willingness to think outside the box. And the way that you, as the scapegoat, didn't conform to all the things that they conformed to their whole life, that they were bitter and despised you for. Like all of these things, the scapegoat has so many beautiful qualities that actually get them scapegoated. And then it becomes this self fulfilling prophecy to where they become these bad behaviors because they were basically breathed into them that that's who they were. But I want anyone to hear, whether you're golden child or scapegoat, like this is not about you you being better, you saying it more perfectly. I remember thinking, if I can just explain my pain to them, like in the right way without being too triggering or without this or that, they'll understand. Of course they will. They love me. Like they have to understand. People do not change until people want to change, period. They do not. And we can all take that home and just remember that over and over and over because it's true in adult child and parent relationships too.
I just want to take a moment to let that message sink in for everyone, because that was so incredible how you put that into words, Lauren. Because for sure, we're all thinking that there must
Yeah.
be something wrong with me. And especially the scapegoat, as you were mentioning, they can't handle that badness that they feel within themselves. So they do turn to addiction. So they do turn to self harm in whatever
Yeah.
form that carries out. And they then get severely depressed because they just can't handle what is happening to them, of not being accepted and loved and being rejected and abandoned instead. And it's such an
Mhm.
important message for us to hear, that it is not about us. There is so many deeper layers, as Lauren was saying. And maybe this person is listening to us right now, and whether they are the golden child or the scapegoat, that you paint them so beautifully, that they're two different sides of the coin, where you've got the golden child on the pedestal and the scapegoat that has been outed and
Yeah.
disowned. When you are the scapegoat and you've been shamed so much for these traits that
Mhm.
you may have, or these characteristics, or how you identify, we also
Yeah.
see a lot of scapegoating in that
Totally.
arena as well, that we then start to shame ourselves. We take on that role, and those traits that become our shadows, and
Mhm.
we then exile ourselves in that
Mhm.
way as well. Lauren, to wrap this up, I want to talk about how we can support people right now to, if they
Mhm.
are in a place where, whether they're the golden child or the scapegoat, what they are noticing is that they've been trying to maybe get through to their parents. They are finding that maybe there is no way of being able to say things differently or being able to see their point of view, and there's just so many clashes, and they're getting to the point now where this is start to affect their mental health, their physical health. You mentioned like that chronic illness that you had. They're starting to notice this about themselves as well, and maybe they're at the point where they're like, maybe I need to start to make a decision or set some
Mm.
boundaries around these relationships, whether they're parents, siblings, and how we can support them to do that. So before you go into your suggestions, Lauren, I want to read something from the foreword of your book that was just said so beautifully, that really encompasses how it feels to sometimes be in these types of dynamics and not being able to thrive. And how your colleague has put it is, he said that sometimes trying to heal and grow within those relational dynamics is a little bit like being a tree trying to grow in a forest fire. We can diligently throw water on the flames, but the tree will not thrive. If you can transplant the tree, however, out of the fire and smoke and into a safe and supportive environment, it can absorb sunlight and grow, produce fruit and provide shade, and ultimately become the tree it's designed to be. When I
Mm.
read that, I was like, wow, that is so profound, and really does
Mm.
speak to that authenticity part, that you cannot thrive and be who you were meant to be and live out the desires and the person that you are, that God has intended you to be, when you are caged and in
Yeah.
chains in these dynamics. So, Lauren, I would love to know from your perspective, what do we need to do to take those first few steps? What do we need to think about to be able to put some boundaries in place and actually start stepping into that authenticity part that we spoke about?
Mhm. Mm. Yes. Well, before I forget, I want to share it because I put it together with such tender, loving care. I made a resource, a free guide on my site of all of these. It's called 101 Doses of Courage. And it's all of these different resources that over the last 5 years have been so life giving to me as I've been trying to do exactly what you said. It's a huge playlist that you can just scan and listen to on Spotify of songs that are encouraging or gut wrenching and speak to these dynamics that we're talking about. There's also poetry, different poets, different movies, different shows, different content creators that speak specific to adult children needing to go low or no contact with parents, and different organizations. So you can grab that on my site, flourishtherapy.co, and I would love for
We will
people to
also
have.
put the link in the show notes as well.
Perfect. But I think just on jumping off of that, the resources, other people's survival or encouragement has helped me survive. And that might sound kind of dramatic, but some days felt like I couldn't survive. And so I needed to almost borrow other people's hope and borrow other people's courage. And I did that through music and through movies and all different resources. I would also say that it's really important to be connected to yourself deeply. And as you get deeper and deeper connected to you, you just get more in tune with your knowing. And that can guide you to what you will and will not tolerate, to what you want and don't want. It's like that deep intuition. There's so many different names for it, but it really requires you to connect with yourself. And now, why that's a bit complicated is because when you feel so unsafe in your most intimate and important relationships, it's hard to connect with yourself. So it's kind of like those things in this field that we're in that are a double-edged sword, because to get connected to yourself, you have to get safe, but to get safe, you have to be connected. So grace and compassion for yourself as you seek to do that. It's not perfect, it's messy as hell, and it's also possible. And when you connect more deeply to yourself, it becomes, in a sense, it is easier to make those hard decisions because you value your needs and your values and your priorities. They become really important to you, and that helps direct your decisions. I would also say being really connected to some friends and ideally a coach or a therapist to help this process. Like I said, don't just jump into, like, if you feel super encouraged after this to just like make these huge, massive boundaries, I would say like slow it down first and really have a plan. And if that sounds like too calculated, I would just say a plan will bring you more safety in the short and long term. More safety, more supports, and a way that your nervous system can adjust and go as you um, follow that plan. It just gives you more structure. Your system will probably appreciate that. And then making those boundaries, I feel like there's a lot of content about boundaries and we're all learning it, but the reality is it's just hard to do. Like, we can read as many Instagram posts about boundaries as we want, but when the rubber meets the road, setting the freaking boundary is really hard to do. But as we do it and then we stick to it and we respond with our response that we said we were going to do, um, to maintain that boundary, we will get stronger and stronger in doing that. And the reality is, especially as women, but even men struggle with this, is we weren't modeled it and we haven't gotten a lot of practice at boundaries. So it's hard and it's like a muscle. It takes a lot of work to use it. And it's good for everyone. That's something that if you have a big heart like me and Sammy, like we have to remind ourselves boundaries aren't just loving to self, they're loving to others. And it's how we create a more healthy, balanced world and relationships is through healthy, this is you, this is me, that differentiation between people so that there's not these enmeshed, codependent, unhealthy, or even abusive relationships. Those are not healthy for anyone, or for the world. So it's a really loving, empowering, powerful thing to live out our alignment and our boundaries.
You make a really good point about boundaries, though, especially as anxiously attached lovers
Yeah.
and beauties. Boundaries is something that has always been a big no-no. I know this in my journey. I was almost punished for having boundaries. You're not supposed to say no, but I love how you put it. It's such a loving thing to do, not only for yourself but for others and for the world. And maybe that's where the work needs to start: is your relationship with boundaries in and of itself. Because I
Mm.
know when I started boundary work, I felt so uncomfortable because I didn't like it when people set boundaries with me, because I used to take it personally and I used to get offended. So I wouldn't want to do that with anyone else. But anyway, boundaries, huge topic for another
Huge.
time. But thank you so much for giving us some insight on where people can start. And what it sounds like to me is just start with yourself. Start
Mm.
with building up that
Yes.
sense of self, that self respect, that value, that worth, and putting a plan in place, like not jumping the gun or reacting as you're listening to this podcast episode or as you're listening to the music and the movies that Lauren recommends, of being like, you know what, sod it, I'm cutting everyone off. Like, to actually be careful with how you go about this to protect yourself, to protect your
Yes.
sense of safety as well, so you don't crash and burn. And Lauren, I just want to say thank you so, so, so much for sharing your heart, your journey, your wisdom around this topic. I think it's so important and so brave. Honestly, when I saw that you had this book coming out, I was like, I had so much respect for you, because it takes a
Mm.
lot to write about these types of topics. A lot of
Yeah.
people would not dare. So
Yeah.
I just want to commend you, really, because I think this is a more common issue than we like to believe.
Yeah.
And by you sharing this, your vulnerability brings you so much, well, brings us all power to be
Mm.
able to step into who we truly are, an authentic, in autonomic way. So
Yeah.
I just want to thank you for doing what you're doing, for being
Mm.
here and sharing all of this with us. And like I said, your free resource is definitely going to be in the show notes below, as well as the link to buy the book. And honestly, my loves, if this is resonating with you in any way, I think this book is going to be so incredibly healing and validating and supportive for you. I've already got my copy and I cannot wait to get into it. I'm so excited. But Lauren, is there anything that you want the listeners to know before we wrap this up about your book or about anything else that may be on your mind?
Thank you so much. I think just the writing it was really difficult. And yeah, I genuinely thought so many times of people who needed those doses of courage through my story. We've all survived different traumas and we've all had different losses. This happens to be mine. And my biggest hope with the book is just to encourage other people in the path that they're on. And that's what other books, I have been ravenous for memoirs and reading real stories about people's journeys and how they survive. Like, especially in the beginning, I was just like, I need to know it's possible to live a full, beautiful life on the other side of this much traumatic loss because I can't do it if I don't have a vision for it. And other people's stories gave me vision. So that is my hope with Golden Child, that it just gives other people a renewed vision and hope for their own path. And it's a joy to share it with the world. It's terrifying, but it's also a joy. I'm so glad that it's here for others.
I'm so glad to share as well. So that's Golden Child by Lauren Smallcombe, out now,
That's
ready to buy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we will have a link in the show notes.
Yep. Well, also our site, flourishtherapy.co, if you want to connect with us on socials. I post a lot about the book, and yeah, I would just love to encourage you in that way as well.
Absolutely go follow Lauren if you want even more goodness and resources about all of these different themes and topics we spoke about today. And I would love to know if you did buy the book, if you resonated in any way. I'm sure Lauren would as well. Let us know, reach out that this has made an impact on you and you've bought the book and you're reading it, and let us know what your biggest takeaways as well, because we'd love to hear from you. Lauren, thank you so much again, and I'll see you soon.
All right. Thank you. Bye, Sammy.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode on the Relationship Rehab podcast. If you really enjoyed this episode, it would really mean a lot to me if you was to share this episode with a friend who really needs to hear what has been talked about today, and also to rate and review this podcast. Hit that subscribe or follow button so you don't miss any new episodes coming out. And as always, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment and let me know what your biggest takeaway was from this episode.